Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Evans. I'm the marketing director for Baker & Mcguire Furniture. Today, we are excited to have Thomas Pheasant with us as we play a video of a Q&A we did where we lifted the curtain on the process of designing and launching a furniture collection, touching on the behind the scenes of our photo shoots, as well as a sneak peek into Thomas's forthcoming collection with Mcguire. If you don't know Tom or his work, Tom is internationally recognized for his 30 years of creating interiors. His diverse accomplishments have been widely published in the most prestigious architectural and interior design magazines around the world. And in 2005, he was honored by Architectural Digest US with the distinction Dean of American Design. Based in Washington, D.C., he continues to work on residential and commercial projects throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia, as well as designing multiple furniture collections for Baker & Mcguire. I will let Tom say hi.
Hey, Claire, how are you?
Hi.
Great to be here.
Great. We're so happy to have you. We're excited to share this video.
Great.
And then after the video,
I love your apartment.
Oh, why, thank you. It was designed by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Thomas Pheasant.
Oh yeah, look familiar.
It's a great backdrop for all of my Zooms. We love it.
Great.
After the video, guys, we will answer questions live. So please submit your questions during this video. It should only be about 30 minutes. And then after that, we will answer questions live. So enjoy.
We're going to just kind of go behind the scenes and do a lot of what, we normally don't talk about.
Right.
So what it's like, going behind the scenes of you designing a collection with Baker. We can get into the specifics of how the photo shoots work and things like that. So you have been working with Baker for a very long time. You've got 5 collections over the past 18 years. What was it like during your first collection with Baker?
Well, the first collection was interesting because I had never done it before. I had certainly designed furniture and worked on interiors, but to step into this sort of new role of creating a collection for a large company was new. So fortunately, it was very successful, which is why I'm still here.
Yeah.
But it was a big learning curve, and I learned a lot from the Baker group. I mean, they were a lot of hand-holding in the beginning. Just the whole process was interesting.
Yeah. So how did they approach you? Like how were you found? How did that beginning process start?
Well, it was kind of interesting because they had seen my work in publications like AD and El Decor, and they knew that I designed furniture for my projects.
Yeah.
So they were also looking for somebody who had kind of a foundation of classical design to help sort of update their more traditional collections. So, but interestingly enough, when they called me and asked me, I was very, delighted. But I told them no, and I think they were shocked. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, I had my studio going, everything was good, and I was a little concerned about stepping into a large company and being controlled a bit. So. But within a short amount of time, they convinced me to try, and it's been a great relationship. It's been 18 years, which I never ever imagined would happen.
Yeah, you didn't think it'd be this long.
Right.
Well, we're honestly very lucky to have you for this long, and excited that we've been able to do all these collections with you, both with Baker and with Mcguire. But that's interesting. I didn't know that you said no in the beginning. That's awesome, and that we got you back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that speaks to the power of the group of Baker, and certainly over 18 years, there have been different people on the Baker team. But this sounds Pollyanna, but I've never had a bad experience. And I think that Baker's appreciated my focus and my determination to make the collection successful. And I've more than appreciated their support and their team kind of ethic, Yeah. And that was very interesting because I flew to Chicago and they wanted to convince me to do it. I flew to Chicago and they had a conference room set up, and I thought I would walk in, it would be the president of the company and maybe the ownership. but it was like 12 people, and there was the president was there, one of the owners was there from Kohler, but they had people from all, they had marketing, they had people from the factory, all there to talk to me. And not so much about what they wanted, but really to hear what I felt I could bring. And I thought, wow, what a twist, you know? And so they really got me.
Yeah, that's something that we've always, you know, anytime we bring someone new in, and it's not even with a collection, even if it's, you know, a new hire or something like that, we all like to get together and talk about, you know, here's what I do. Let's focus on your collection and what, you know, what you want to do, what you envision, and then we can work together. So then you can meet all the team players that you're going to eventually work with, because, you know, you start off with product development, right?
Yeah.
So you go through that, you design the collection, and then once it gets closer to the launch date, then you come over to my department and about, you know, how are we going to promote this? How are we going to do our photo shoots? You know, all that stuff. Right. And so, you know, having those big meetings is really nice to get you familiar from the start with everyone.
And I think what's very interesting, and you know, this is some advice for people who are, I know a lot of designers approach me and they ask about how do you do licensing agreements, what, you know, how did you get in the door? But I think one thing a designer really has to think about is when you enter into that, when you're creating product, the bottom line is sales. So you can have all the creative energy in the world, but you have to put on a different hat than you might do in doing your interiors, where it's your brand and your name. So the real challenge is, how do you design a collection that's going to appeal to a broad audience? And how do you develop a concept that's acceptable enough, I guess, and also approachable, and also will appeal to, you know, lots of different type of interiors, not just perhaps your own personal idea of how to put an interior together. So I find that actually the most fascinating aspect of the whole process. You know?
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's why it's so important to enter into a collaboration and a partnership with someone who you work well with. You can tell it's going to be great, because there will be times where you know, you may design something, and from our perspective, we're like, that normally doesn't sell. You know, maybe we tweak it this way to make it more sellable to a general audience, broader audience. But yeah, you know, that relationship between the brand and you is very important for those things. You know, I think we always want to make sure that, you know, the designer's vision is portrayed. So it looks like, you know, wow, that's so Tom, but at the same time, it's got to have a common thread between all of our collections, and it has to be a stellar Baker piece, you know, and having that relationship where, you know, you're not going to get too upset if we tell you, you know, that may not work. We've experienced it, we've tried it, and it just didn't sell.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, but I think that's part of the relationship, and you know, certainly every designer is different, every company has a different method of how they want to see their brand shown. But it's interesting, part of that give and take, it isn't that different than doing residential interiors, in the sense that you've got to be a good listener. You know, your job, the job of design is in residential is creating interior people. So you certainly want to incorporate your aesthetic and your view, but there has to be some give and take with understanding the client. Well, the same thing is with product. And you know, and knowing when to push, you know, knowing when to listen. When Baker comes and says, "Tom, it's a great idea, but you know, we're concerned about sales," you really have to open your mind to listen to that and understand why. But there are moments where you have to push back. And on the first collection, it was great, because I had designed the collection, and everything was, you know, everything was getting great reviews from the Baker team, and then I had this idea for a mirror that actually was inspired by an antique brooch that I saw in Paris. And I did the sketch and I sent it out, and you know, everybody loved the idea, but they came back and they said, you know, we've looked at this, it's going to be expensive. To do a good job on production, it'll be expensive, and quite honestly, the price point, it won't really sell, but we will do it for High Point as like an iconic, you know, sort of emblem for the collection debut. So okay. You know, I was just concerned they were going to make it. Well, that was the Constellation mirror, which was in 2002, and it's been a top seller for Baker, and it's been ripped off by everybody in every dimension and size you can imagine. But I think that's kind of the interesting thing, and I consider myself an experienced designer. Certainly after 18 years of doing product, I understand an aspect of product design. But even with all that experience, I think there are pieces that you just don't know what the public response is going to be. And every collection has an iconic piece that, the sales just went off the roof. But I think even now it's hard to predict. I have my instincts, but sometimes it's very hard to predict what that piece will be.
Yeah, it is hard to predict. And, there's always, when we present it to, a good way to tell what those pieces are going to be and what's going to work is when we present it to the press, right?
Right.
It's always interesting to see what pieces do well with the press. And then, sometimes that doesn't translate into sales or a top seller, but it's great because it's all press and gets, people looking at the rest of the collection.
Right.
But yeah, there's always those times where we may question it, but then having, someone like you who is using that product in projects and knows the interior designers and things like that, having someone say, well, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. Right. And then who knows, it turns into an iconic piece. Right. So do you have a very favorite piece that you've ever designed for Baker?
Well, it's funny. I don't even know. I've never done a count of how many pieces since 2002 and the 5 collections there are. I'm going to look into that. But I think every collection had something that was the most memorable piece. And sometimes it's just because, the struggle with engineering, like the Athens Chair from 2012, it was the first piece I sketched out for the collection, and it was the last piece that was fabricated before market because it was so difficult. And a number of times Baker was ready to throw in the towel, and I just kept pushing. And through the team, they supported me, and we got it done. And it's been an iconic chair. But like with this new collection, I'm in my home, but the Delgado pendant you see back there. That piece is probably the most memorable of the new collection because, as part of the process, Baker allows me to go to Italy where a lot of the accessories and lighting are fabricated. And I was in a workroom, and it's a small, very small atelier with these 2 Italian guys who didn't speak English very well. And I was looking at what they were doing, and there were some pieces, just these raw pieces of bronze laying around. And I just sketched out this simple idea for the Delgado pendant. And, I showed it to them. We were using our hands and sketching back and forth. And through that afternoon, this piece was developed. Well, for me, it was a growing piece. It was something that just organically happened in the studio. It didn't happen at my desk in Washington, D.C., in my little box. And those are the pieces that I think create sort of a interior evolution in your thought process and how you work. So often as designers, I could get very locked into my studio and just work from my office. But it's like when you go out and you explore venues that are not around the corner, that I think you really grow. And certainly learning from great artisans is the best classroom. So.
Well, and stories like that are really amazing, drawing something up kind of on the spot like that after you get to have some time with the artisans, see what they can do, look at that beautiful material in person. And then I think it's, it just shows how much of a true creator and innovator you are to be able to design something like that right there. And, that kind of leads into another question, with an entire collection, how long does it take for you to conceptualize either a piece or the whole vibe of the collection? Tell us what that process was like.
Actually, it's kind of interesting. If you told me right now, Tom, we got to do a collection, you got to design a collection by next Sunday, I think I could do it. It's like, it would be, and the sketches and the drawings that I would do would reflect where I am today when you ask the question. And that's the other incredible thing about, I have this like folio of evolution with the Baker Company, because I can look back at any one of the catalogs and I see my own personal growth. I remember what projects I was doing in my studio at the time. So it's kind of interesting how that flow works. And, you know, it's, right now we're working on a new collection from Mcguire that came right after a trip to Japan, which this design that I'm doing could only have happened now. It couldn't have happened last year because I hadn't been to Japan. So,
well, let's talk about that. We were going to kind of wait for the end to kind of preview that, but now that we've brought it up, let's just go ahead and talk about it. So you are working on a collection from Mcguire, which is really exciting for us. You've designed for Mcguire before. Your last one was in 2007. So now you're designing this beautiful collection. Tell us, we've got some inspiration, and we have an inspiration image, and then we're going to show a preview of a piece. So talk to us about, you know, give us a little preview of what's to come.
Well, I think, you know, when again, getting back to that idea of doing licensing, I think one of the important parts for a designer is to really connect to the legacy of the company.
Yeah.
You know, Baker's legacy is one thing, Mcguire is a very different company. And so it's not only, you know, using your own voice, it's understanding the history of the brand and what is it about that brand that makes it special. Well, when I recently, in November, had 2 weeks in Japan, it was my first trip, and I was blown away by the culture, by the country, by the people, by the, you know, the constant stimulation of beauty. And I really connected to their connection to nature. And while I was there, I didn't go to Japan to do a collection from Mcguire, but immediately, you know, within a few days, I was already sketching out ideas, connecting it to this organic sensitivity that Mcguire has. But what was so beautiful about the Japanese culture, or what is beautiful about it, is their respect and their quiet connection to whatever they're doing. And certainly nature plays a big role in their gardens and their aesthetic. So, you know, and it combines the idea of, you know, form and simplicity and materials and texture, all the things that I like to connect to in my own work. But I think it was also because I spent so much time in European countries and of course in the US that I'm so comfortable, and to go into a different culture and to be, you know, shaken a bit, stimulated was just, you know, it was the best. Again, it's like getting out of your block and going somewhere new and opening your eyes. So, so
experiencing just everything that's out there and seeing, I've never been to Japan and I've always wanted to go.
I can't wait to go back. Well, even with their modern, you know, with all of their modern growth, they've managed to contain their culture in a way that's very difficult anywhere else.
Yeah.
And you see that culture in the fashion, you see it in architecture, every element of design, presentation, shopping, food stores. I mean, it's just, it's really remarkable.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I hear. Everything is just so thoughtful.
Yeah, and also I think part of their beauty is the subtle nature and express. I mean, nothing is thrown at you.
Yeah.
Basically, everything calls you in, which is something that, you know, here we're more about, you know, yelling from the rooftops about look what we did, look what we've done, and there you have to go to it. They don't, you know, it's not an aggressive communication, which is beautiful in itself.
Yeah. You said you were inspired by gardens and things like that. Did any of that, you know, nature within Japan fall into the inspiration for the collection?
Yeah, I think pretty much almost everything that I'm doing for the new collection is inspired by nature, by the outside, by the gardens, and their ability, you know, the interesting ways they use nature in nature. So whether it's the fencing or the pathways or any kind of structures that you find in a garden, whether it's a formal garden or out in a forest, everything is organic and respectful, and nothing looks out of place. You know, you don't see stone fountains and, you know, elaborate man-made structures in a sense. You see materials that are man-made, but they almost look as if nature called and asked for it. So this is one of the pictures. This was actually in one of the forests in Kyoto, and I was taken by the beauty of how they protected the trees from insects. And this is they used bamboo and rope and just tied the trunks of the trees, and it was an alley of trees that were done this way, and the color and the texture was so much like and of the forest that it just became the subtle detail that was, you know, just so elegant. So this idea of using these materials is what I'm attempting to do with my new collection for Mcguire. And so one of the upholstery groupings that I'm doing is a wood frame, and I'm using rope as a support to detail the arms and the back. I think you have a picture. Yeah. So, you know, so this is, you know, I always say, you know, inspiration isn't replication. It's about seeing something and allowing it to, you know, filter through your own sensitivity, so that when that inspiration comes out, it comes out in a new way. So, you know, this frame, this is a raw frame. It doesn't have the upholstery on the back. You just see the frame there. But this wood with the rope is, to me, it's a direct connection to what I experienced in Japan. Although obviously I didn't see this, but there's an inspiration there that as you see the collection as a whole, that spirit, I hope, will be conveyed without me describing what it is that I've seen or where I've been. So.
Well, gorgeous. And, you know, I've seen a lot of, you know, the kind of sketches and pre, you know, production of what you're working on. And I can tell you guys it's going to be pretty stellar and really exquisite.
Yeah, actually, because of the shutdown, this was supposed to get launched in fall.
Yeah.
But because of the shutdown, we pushed it to spring 2021. But next week, we're supposed to have our first review. So a lot of the prototypes are coming in. And I'm very frustrated because I'm going to have to do a FaceTime review, at least for this first, and which is like, oh my God, it's like tying my hands behind my back.
Yeah.
but we'll slowly, we have a little more time. So slowly, I'm going to be there eventually. So,
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, fingers crossed everything starts to get better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can imagine, you know, going to a product review is where you really finalize those details, and then having to do it over, you know, FaceTime and Zoom is going to be tough. But, you know, we've got our experienced team on our end. You've done this. This is going to be, you know, number 3 or 4 for Mcguire, and you've done 5 with Baker. So
yeah, well, I tell you
how it goes, right?
Well, I think, you know, the other part of product development is you have to be your worst critic. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I'm anticipating that I'll go in there and there may be some engineering issues which will be addressed, but the aesthetic of the piece is really falling on me. So, you know, like I say, you've got to be your worst critic, because once you launch, it's out there. You know?
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And you can make changes after, but it's, you know, it launches and so many people see it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other problem, you know, culturally, it's like you get your 5 seconds and then next. So, you know, I think it's funny, sometimes I've been at High Point where we've launched a collection and some of the editors come in and they're like, okay, well, what's next? And, you know, you're standing there and you just spent a year developing 50 pieces, and they're already looking to, okay, well, what's coming up next? So, you know, it's like, I wish we could just savor the moment a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe
this is the nature of their job. They've always got to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe all this time at home will allow us to think about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, great. We're really excited about the collection with Mcguire. the next topic that I really am excited to discuss is something that, you know, isn't really discussed a lot. It's the behind the scenes of how our photo shoots work. And I think, I'm hoping that the viewers are really gonna like this topic. So guys, let us know in the comment section if this is something you're interested in, or if you wanna learn more. But essentially, you know, the way that our photo shoots work from, you know, in-house at Baker, we've got in-house collections, and then we also have our guest designer collection. So the two types of photo shoots are just different in terms of we're bringing you in to this photo shoot. So from the start, we have a conversation about, you know, what you envision, how you envision the product being shown. And obviously, you know, the guest designers, it's their job to design for people. So it just works out really well for us to be able to collaborate on that and get your expertise to just make it as perfect as possible. So we start out with having this conversation. You know, you, Tom, are very detail oriented. You send us drawings and sketches and 3D models and you know, just crazy details, which is great because it makes it so easy for us. So we're going to show you some pictures of how we kind of do this. So you sent over, here's an example. Here is an example of kind of a model that we've mocked up. And what we do with this, when you give us how you want it to be placed in the set, we turn this into a shot list. So the sectional, the tables, the chairs, and even the dining scene in the back, we will take that, turn it into an Excel document with pictures of how it's going to be placed. So it's all in one spot. We print that off for everyone, you know, at the photo studio, our team, your team, so everyone knows where we are. And it's just our guide to make sure that the photo shoots as smoothly as possible. Right. And so in this, you can see the placement of the pieces, and then you can see these walls. We did a pretty big set design for this particular photo shoot. We built a number of walls, but we built it in a way where they were movable, and we could switch them out for different sets that we're doing. So, for example, here is, you know, a reference of architectural drawing that you sent over for us for the walls. And then here is kind of how the walls are set up, and you can see that they're movable. So, you know, it's really nice for us to be able to make sure, you know, having this and making it run very smoothly. So I want to show you guys, we go from this, and then here's the final image. So you can see the progression of kind of what it takes to get this beautiful image here. And it was really fun for us, Tom, to do this photo shoot with you. That was my first photo shoot with you. And yeah, you have this air on set, you know what you want, and I think we synced very well on that photo shoot.
Yeah, well, you know, it's been interesting because I've done a number of them, and the big difference between doing a photo shoot for a project and doing a photo shoot for a brand is when we do our interiors, we want the interior photography to really echo the client. You know, it's a very personal insight into the person's life. It's exactly the opposite when we're trying to stage for a product, because I want people to look at the advertisement or the image and put themselves in the picture, right? So it's kind of complicated. You got to show the product.
Yep. You
got to make it open enough to accept other people's ideas and thoughts, you know, and it also has to speak, for me, the set has to speak to the idea behind the furniture. So, you know, I've talked so much about, you know, simplicity and form, all the things that are important to me. So I wanted the imagery in the architecture of the photographs to kind of support the product. So that's how we can.
Yeah, and it's great, you know, hearing the difference between you setting up for a project photo shoot instead of a product photo shoot. You know, for example, this image, the placement of the chair in the front, which is a little cut off, but the chair has a really great detail in the back where the back is angled and the foot comes out in the back, the leg. And so, you know, we have to be really thoughtful on the product side of it and the marketing side of it, you know, and sales and things like that, to make sure that those elements are shown, but in a thoughtful way. And that's where you come in to make it look like, you know, this looks like it could be in someone's home. But yeah, you know, we have to really kind of be thoughtful and think about those things and show all the colorways and make sure everything is represented. And then also just make sure that the whole photo shoot has a commonality, you know, with lighting, the pieces and the artwork. And so, you know, I'm going to show an example of, here's one photo, the one that's up now, and then a different photo that is a very different vibe, but you can tell it's part of the same photo shoot. And that is this one. And then your Delgado pendants are in there as well, which we talked about earlier. But you can see, you know, the different set designs here, but how they still have that common thread throughout the whole photo shoot.
Right, and I think you want, again, everybody's flipping the page or swiping their screen.
Yep.
So you don't have a lot of time for people to peruse your image. So you don't want the interior to be the distraction.
Yeah.
You want the product to pop. So, and then for you as a marketing person, I know you're going to want, if it's an ad, there may be print on the page, and so there's a lot that goes into a successful shoot, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, you know, let's talk about who gets the final say on the images, because that's a big part of it too. Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's a collaborative effort, but in the end, we want you to be happy with those images.
Right.
So you kind of set up the whole scene, say, okay, it's perfect, let's take a shot, let's see what it looks like on camera. And then after it's ready to go and we've shot it a couple of times, I'll kind of step in if I see something like we talked about, if there's a piece of art or an accessory that is blocking some blank wall. You know, when launching these images and using them for collateral and social and, you know, invites and things like that, we have to make sure that text and logos are going to look good on this and not too busy, make it legible, you know, especially for ads and things like that. So it's a really nice collaborative effort there where you come in with the creativity, and then I make sure it's going to work in all assets or all facets that we need. Yeah.
And you know, what was interesting about this collection was a lot of it was inspired by American artists, minimalist artists, and so I have that subtle message on the wall. Those were my attempt at Ellsworth Kelly painting. So, you know, again, I wanted something that would not really take away from the upholstery, but kind of subliminally speaks to the concept of the collection. So, you know, I have my own agenda, and I know Baker's trying to sell the print, and they've got media that they have, marketing tools they have to make it work for. So, but I think it's, in the end, you know, when we review together the imagery, I think we were all happy with the outcome. So.
Yeah, we got a lot of images, we got a lot of detail. You know, we usually take a full image of the full setting, and then we go in and just take a lot of details just to be able to use them, you know, as much as possible for broad, you know, details on social media work really well. The big overall lifestyle works really well. You know, and nowadays, social media, you know, Instagram is the new homepage, right? So we have to always make sure we're getting the most, you know, as much images as we can. We're trying to get the most out of this photo shoot that we can. And that's a really hard thing to do when you've got so many things to think about, you know, getting all of that product photographed, making sure everything is represented right. If we are using this for an ad campaign, that's a whole different beast, you know, making sure it works there, as well as making sure we have enough of those assets to make it last through a very long, you know, social media campaign and things like that.
Right, and you know, the underlying dilemma is we go into it knowing we have like 2 days. And it takes so much effort. And, you know, until you get there and you're looking at the camera, you're never 100% sure of what you're going to end up with.
Exactly.
But you know you only have 2 days, so there's a lot of pressure. You know, I'm pressured because I want a good image. Baker's pressured because they need a good image and they need to get out and go to the next thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a fascinating experience to go through it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm always really happy when.
Yeah.
But,
It always feels good to see it all together, and you're like, we did it, and it always pulls through. You know, we always get it.
it does. It
Great.
always does. I don't know how that happens, but it does. It does always happen.
Somehow it happens. And speaking of, you know, see camera and off camera, I think, you know, we had a discussion before we did this about what we wanted to share and things like that, and we both agreed that showing what the image looks like, the real image that we took on camera, and then showing what it looks like off camera.
Yeah.
So we can show this, what's up now is on camera, and then here's what it looked like off camera. You know, it looks very much the same, but you can see the guys here constructing the set and moving these walls in and out. And then another great example is, here's this final image, and then here's what it looks like off camera. So you can see, you know, how we set it up, but you can just see how much work it goes in. You know, the photographer is really important. The lighting is really important. All of those things. But yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite parts about it, is what it looks like on camera and what it doesn't look like on camera. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. So Tom, what's your favorite part about photo shoots?
The end.
The end, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really nice to have a documented history of what you've spent 1 year, 2 years, you know, residentially 3 or 4 years building, and trying to, you know, capture the spirit of what you're trying to do. And in residential, you know, capturing your client and, you know, seeing your own, you know, growth and evolution through every project. You know, every client brings something new to us, and you know, it's great. I mean, I love residential design. I don't think I'll ever. Well, I could probably ease up a bit and do more, just focus on product. And maybe one day that will happen. I don't think I could give up the personal experience of creating residential interiors. I think there's just something special and rewarding about creating a home and making a difference, really, you know, creating a home for other people.
Sorry, I was muted. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. We really enjoyed doing that with Tom. We can now start the live Q&A. We got a lot of great questions from you guys. We will just wait for Tom to hop on. Okay, hey.
Hey.
Okay, so we have lots of questions. First one, what is your favorite part of the furniture design process?
Wow. I love it all. I think the launching of the concept, you know, coming up with, okay, what's the direction? And I think that's an important thing for people who are interested in doing collections, because, you know, it's sort of like with the residential interiors. I mean, each one of my projects is different in terms of the client and the location, and doing a collection and deciding on what the focus of that is, it's essential, but it's hard sometimes because there's so many things that are possible. So, you know, it's sort of, as we get close to launching a collection, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 other concepts might have come across your head, you know, oh, well, you know, we could have done this or we could have done that. So I think it's launching that idea and committing to it through the whole process and sticking with it, you know. And like I said on the video, it was like being your own critic and being critical about the collection in a way. Is it cohesive? It isn't much different. I think we're all fashion oriented. So think of it as a fashion show.
Yeah.
When a designer presents, the editors want, they want to grab onto what is the concept of the collection. It can't just be a bunch of beautiful things that are disjointed. So I think it's coming up with the concept, that launching of the idea is the most fun.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Next question. When you are in the beginning stages of developing a collection, where do you typically get the inspiration from?
Well, it can be, typically it has something to do with what I'm involved in at the moment.
Yeah.
100% of the time. When I was talking about the Mcguire collection, I knew that I was going to be doing something with Mcguire, and I had gone on vacation for my first trip, and it was just an overwhelming experience visually and creatively. So that was kind of an interesting coincidence of timing. But a lot of times the collections that I do for Baker are happening in conjunction with residential projects. So the beauty about my clients and doing the products for them is I get to experiment with every project, and clients want me to create unique pieces for them. So I'm constantly in touch with artisans. I'm constantly pushing my own envelope. So when Baker knocks, it's sort of like, well, come in, let's see what we're doing, and how can I translate this into a reasonable collection that makes sense, and and that people will want to identify. I think one of the trickiest things about doing collections for any designer is there's so much product.
Yeah.
There's so much product. And so while I get this platform I'll get a platform at market, and everybody will come and it's great, but they come through and then they go to like dozens of other showrooms, and there's and it's twice a year.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, and now it's changing, so now people are launching whenever they want. So I think that's it's tricky to you've got this moment to grab people, and it's an amazing industry. But so with all the competition, how do you do? In my case, I love form and simplicity, and I'm a neutralist, and so how do you do that and raise yourself above a crowd of similar product? What is it? What is it that's going to stand out? So I think those spots are they're the most trying parts of putting the collection together. So
Yeah.
But it's great.
Well, I completely agree with you with the saturation of product that's out there, and it's hard for you when you're designing the collections. For us, it's hard for us to get it out there and stand out with the press and the clients and the designers and everyone coming through.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question we have from an anonymous attendee: it's so interesting to learn about the behind the scenes of creating a collection like this. I'm interested in hearing from Thomas on how interior design has evolved since COVID hit. Are there elements that designers, clients are looking for now that weren't main focuses beforehand?
I think we're really still stuck in this sort of fog of the COVID pandemic. I know that I am personally, and I see it around me with everyone. I do think, because there's things that I'm actually thinking about for myself, and in some new projects that we're developing currently, I've gone to the clients and we've discussed things like, it would have never occurred to me before this happened that, wow, there should be like a receiving station. I mean, get rid of the wrapping room and the craft room, and create a space that things can be brought in, cleaned, handled, put away. I mean, those kinds of just basic things.
Yeah, and a room where,
right.
And
unfortunately, even the idea of having, I don't like this term, but a sick room, like a room within a home or residence that if someone was ill, they would have all the amenities they would require and be able to be, located in one aspect of the house for the benefit of the other people they're living with. I mean, those are kind of sad thoughts, but I think they will come back. You know, it's interesting. We're so resilient as people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at 9/11, I was like, you know, you were thinking at the time, it was so devastating and shocking. Like, oh, well, how are we all going to just jump back on planes? And how are we? Well, we do. We're survivors. And,
Yeah.
you know, there just has to be some good about this that comes out, whether it's within our homes and within the way we communicate and deal with each other. But I will be happy when this is part of our past, though. I will
Yes.
say that. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Another question, any design trends you're forecasting for 2021? Colors, materials, room focuses, which I think we just touched on, things like that.
Well, Chris, now I'm talking about where my head is right now. My head right now is in natural materials, organic things. And, you know, even when we were talking to Mcguire about, we're developing fabrics for the collection. So, you know, I wanted everything to be natural fibers. I wanted to have organic textures. So it still is a neutral palette,
Yeah.
you know, per tom, but the weaves and the textures are very different from what I would typically use. I mean, there's a lot more variation, a lot more craft in the fabrics.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and again, there's so much product and there's so much demand. I mean, you know, when people talk about trends, it's such a personal thing. I mean, trends are great, they're exciting, but you take what you want and you leave the rest. And it's kind of like that every year. Yeah. But right now I'm into organic, I'm into natural materials. And, you know, it's a very different feeling from the set you have behind you for Baker, where, you know, I was more concerned with refinement and shape and really saying the most with the least. Now I guess I'm trying to do that with Mcguire, but I'm using, you know, texture and raw material to express what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
And it's a very different look, but there's still Tom in there. There's, you know, with Mcguire, it's the form and, you know, my scale of things, how I see it. So that's the beauty. So.
Well, and that natural, organic, you know, that goes really well with Mcguire too. So
yeah, exactly.
Great.
The brand.
What is your favorite piece by Mcguire, if you have one? Not one of your pieces.
Oh, wow. I don't know.
Or one of your pieces.
Well, no. Okay. Well, let's talk about my pieces. No. You know, there's so many. That's always, it's like saying, who's your favorite designer? I always get stumped. I think it's more the legacy of Mcguire, and you go back through the 50s and the 60s. You know, and part of my connection to the founders was I wanted the brand to connect to what I'm doing as much as I was trying to connect to them. So, you know, it's, I don't know. It's hard to say. There's so much. I mean, I've loved what a lot of the designers have done. And I think a lot, and when you look at the more recent, over the last 2 decades, you see how different designers have all tried and have actually achieved that connection in their own voices. So, you know, that's what I'm trying to do. So.
Yeah, the materiality and the history and legacy behind Mcguire is just so strong that I think it's really, like you said, it's really easy it's not easy to design the collection, but it's easy to make the pieces unique while keeping in line with who Mcguire is.
Right. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, it's amazing how many people say, oh, you're doing an outdoor collection. And I go, no, it's indoors.
Yeah.
So there's still misconceptions. I mean, relative to Baker, Mcguire is very much a boutique brand.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the beauty of it. Because to do what they do, you can't be big.
Yeah.
You can't be all over the place. So it is a very focused vocabulary, and that's the beauty of Mcguire.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I will skip to another question we got. It's a little further down the line, but it relates to this. And that is, what is it like designing a furniture collection for Baker versus Mcguire?
Well, I think with Mcguire, like I was just speaking about, it's that connection to nature and the history, the evolution of a particular way of thinking about nature and furniture. I don't know if that's too general, but Mcguire, Baker is a much broader thing. In Baker, it's a little bit more about Tom Pheasant, and there's room there. When Baker comes to me, it's interesting. When they first came to me in 2002, the reason they came to me was they saw that I was from Washington, D.C., and they knew that I had a connection to classical design and interiors. I was young then, and they wanted me to kind of think of a collection that would touch on a new spirit of classical ideas in furniture, which was perfect for me at the time.
Yeah.
So, and that's how it was launched, and it has evolved just as I've evolved. And so Baker has given me a chance to sort of follow my path, in a way. With Mcguire, it was a little different because I had to get off the path, and I had to go somewhere else, and then bring that into my own vocabulary. So,
yeah,
that's it's great. And that's, again, it speaks to the beauty of a designer trying to connect to what they're being asked to do and the company that's asking. And once you make that connection, it just kind of becomes very, well, it's not easy, but it becomes natural in a way.
yeah.
And the proof is in the market and how people respond ultimately.
Yeah.
So.
Well, great. I will jump back up to the questions. How did you get your start in interior design?
Let me think. Actually, when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Maryland. I started in the architecture department, and I loved it. And I grew up in a modest middle class suburb of DC. We didn't have designers and architects driving down our streets. It was, but I was always connected to architecture and design in my own way. And during my second year at the University of Maryland, I gave a presentation to a professor one-on-one, and he came back to me and he said, "Tom, of the 20 students, you're the only one who took me inside first." And he said, "You really, I think you got a connection to this. We've got a great interiors department at the university. You should maybe next semester take some interiors classes." It was funny because I walked out of the meeting devastated in a way, because I thought, oh my God, the guy's telling me that, well, maybe architecture is not the right thing. Maybe you ought to try something else. That's how I took it. So the next semester, I stayed in architecture, but the next semester I took 2 interior design classes, and it was like a bullet. It's like, oh my God, it's like I found myself. And from that point, so it really speaks to the nurturing and the importance of professors and teachers in our lives, and how one meeting, 1 hour, a person connected to me and pushed me or showed me another direction.
Yeah.
So that's how it started, and then I got a job with an interior design firm here in Georgetown and residential, and stayed there for a few years, and then decided, I'm going to try this. And I had nothing to lose, and I tried it, and it seems to have worked out.
I think it did work out.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Very much so. Well, that's a great story. Someone asked, when will the new Thomas Pheasant for Mcguire collection launch? We did answer that in the video, and it is spring 2021. Like Tom mentioned in the video, it was slated for this fall, but with COVID, we have pushed it to spring 2021, and we are working on it. We've already started getting ready for the marketing on it, and we're excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. The neutrals and warm woods in your Baker collection seem to be a signature of your style. And in parentheses, he or she put, I love. Do you see yourself ever incorporating more color in your designs or furniture pieces?
Well, residentially, I do. If I have a client who loves color, I find that exciting. Color becomes part of the focus of doing it. I do color my way. I basically like to treat color like I treat neutrals. So if a room doesn't have to be beige or gray, it can be red or blue or green or brown or whatever color.
Yeah.
But it's how I see the color working together in a field of color, as opposed to a red room with a yellow chair, or color blocking like that. So for my products, again, this is partly marketing and partly identity. I'm obviously very super comfortable with being a neutralist. Actually, I used to hate it because editors used to, when I first started getting published, I was the modern classicist and the neutralist. He always uses neutrals. Well, what happened was the magazines kept publishing those kinds of interiors. So you immediately get like branded. Now you get branded in 5 minutes. So, but I kind of, what I like about the neutrals for product is, again, it doesn't impose anything on the viewer or the customer. It allows it's easier to look at the room behind you and look at the furniture and not be distracted. But people who love color have no problem, creating that element in their minds when they look at product. So I think people who are neutralists have a harder time looking at explosions of color and imagining themselves in the spaces. So, I don't know. But I'm very comfortable with the neutrals. And like I said, with the Mcguire pieces, the fabrics and the textures are neutral, but it's about the textures. That's the story to me.
Yeah.
It's what I saw and what I felt when I was in Japan. So both in fashion and in what I saw in interiors and in the forests. So I try to bring that.
Great. I think we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay.
Let's see. Tom, is there another industry sector that you see yourself breaking into in the future, i.e. textiles, tabletop, decor, or other?
Yes, I think I would like to do more product design. I'm doing some creative lighting right now for someone, and I've always liked the idea of doing tabletop, glassware, whatever. But I hope that would be in my future. I mean, I certainly am open to it more and more. So we'll see. I mean,
Well, that's exciting for us to be able to see what's coming.
That's right.
Maybe one day we'll be sipping out of Thomas Pheasant wine glasses and
why not? Why not?
Why not? Okay, so is there anything about your job that has changed for the better since quarantine or the pandemic has begun?
Well, for the better. I think there are tools that I've learned, that we will take once this is over, hopefully, that we will continue to use. I mean, as annoying as the Zoom meetings may be and FaceTime, because they're a necessity, I have learned that I can do a lot of site work through Zoom meetings or FaceTime. Yeah. So rather than traveling to Los Angeles twice a month to review, a site or wherever I'm going, part of that could be done, with my laptop or my iPad. So, that's kind of a nice way of taking some of the edge off the constant. I mean, it was amazing. I travel so much that to go from traveling constantly to stopping, I have not really traveled since March.
Yeah.
It's hard. I have a new appreciation for travel. I swear I'm never going to complain at an airport again. Yes. But I think it's finding a balance. I do. Yeah. There's no way that we're going to come out of this not being different.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've got to learn and use what we've learned about it. I think one of the nice things is I've gotten closer to my family.
That's great.
I've had more time with them. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. The closeness and spending more time and putting more effort into family and pets and, just loved ones in general, I think has been a really great thing that has come out of this. And yeah. I, like you, was in the airport at least once a month, not as much as you are, but it was weird getting used to being at the airport, and then it just stopped. And I
Yeah.
haven't, I mean, I haven't been on a plane since. I've driven around, but you know, as safely as possible, but it's.
Actually, I drove to, we've had two Mcguire
Yeah.
reviews, and I drove from Washington, down there, did the reviews and drove back the same day. Oh, man,
That's crazy.
that's a long day, but it
That
was
is a
fun.
long
It was
day.
worth it. Yeah. That I'm not going to do anymore once this
Yeah.
is over, but it was good.
Yeah. Well, that is all the time we have today. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Tom, for being a part of this. And maybe you guys will catch us doing this again soon.
All right. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.